Welcome back to the Artie Lange Show. My next guest wrote a book called The Fix Is In. The Showbiz Manipulations of the NFL, MLB, NBA, NHL, and NASCAR. It's a pretty daunting title. I want to talk to him a little bit about it. Here's Brian Tuohy. What's up, Brian?
What's up, Artie? How you doing tonight?
Good. So give me the reason you wrote this book, how you know this stuff. Give me the origins of all this. How'd this happen?
Well, basically, I was a fan of sports.
Right.
And over time, as I grew up and matured, I realized, look, these professional sports leagues aren't telling me the truth. They're lying to me about the criminals playing the game. They're lying to me about the gambling that goes on around, surrounding the game, and sometimes within the game.
Right.
And they have the media, the sports media, basically in their back pocket because, let's face it, ESPN, and these other networks fund the professional sports leagues. They don't exist without that money coming in. And I started to believe if they can control everything outside and surrounding the games, why can't they control their product itself, which is the games?
Right.
And that's what they're selling to us. So I believe the leagues can and do and have manipulated the outcome of their own games to get greater television ratings, more ad revenue, and greater profit altogether.
Okay, now give me some of the worst offenses you think that made you inspired you to write a book. Like, give me some detailed things that happened.
Well, I don't believe in coincidence. I don't believe that, people make billions of dollars just by pure luck. And that's what, the NFL claims. They say, we've never had a game fixed by organized crime or gamblers in our history. And obviously they say, they've never touched their games themselves.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they need that $6 billion a year from the television networks to thrive and survive.
Okay.
And so I don't believe that any other major company out there just leaves itself up to chance.
You're kind of like
McDonald's just things leave up to chance. Does Chrysler leave things up to chance? No, they control it as much as they can.
Right.
And the fact is, it's perfectly legal, and this is the hammering home point for me, is it's perfectly legal for a league like the NFL to fix its own game if it so chooses.
Come on.
How often do you think that happens? I'm sitting next to a guy who was in the NFL for 7 years in the 2000s, and he claims it's a ridiculous claim. How often? And when did this happen?
Are we talking like 1950
and
NFL?
Does it still happen in your opinion?
Right. When are we talking here?
It happens, definitely. I don't believe every game is fixed by any means. No, I don't think that happens. What I think it is I think a league like the NFL, a league like the NBA, when they see profit and motivation attached to certain players, certain storylines, then they're willing to give those players and those teams the help that they may need. And
how do they give them this help?
How do they go about
referees,
fixing it?
Number one.
Referees.
Referees are the easiest way. Tim Donaghy, whether you want to believe him or not.
I believe him.
He was on the show. He said he did it.
I believe him.
He was in trouble with, gambling.
Yeah, well, exactly. Tim Donaghy says the NBA didn't even have to direct the referees how to make things happen. They just knew. They knew that the league wanted it to go to, 6 or 7 games in a playoff series, not a 4-game blowout. So they make certain calls.
Right.
We've seen that in the NFL. You can see instant replays where it shows a guy is clearly in bounds, and yet they rule him out of bounds. Despite the fact that you see the instant replay, you see it on your 60-inch TV at home, the guy's in bounds, they rule him out of bounds.
Okay.
How does that happen if it's not intentional? How do, subjective calls like holding in the NFL, which, some claim can be called on every play, how does, the Packers, when they went 15-1 one season, went to 11 games without a holding call against their offensive line? Judgment calls only go so far, and then you have to say, well, if they're ignoring it here, why do they suddenly call it there? Why do they suddenly call this pass interference on 4th down when this team needs it to keep a drive going? Why do they call it in the end zone when, it's a ticky-tack thing, and then why do you see at the end of the Ravens-49ers Super Bowl, they don't call it?
What's in it?
How is it possible that these officials would all be on this same
I was going to say, what's in it for the refs?
You've got a whole team of guys, and this sort of game manipulation is this subtle. How are they all so good at it that no one except you seems to think this is the case?
Well, is it pure money? What's in it for them?
Well, of course, referees, they get more money when they get the playoff assignments. They get more money when they get the Super Bowl assignments or the Stanley Cup final assignments. They do get paid for this. This is their job. They work for the leagues. And again, if you want to talk, with Tim Donaghy and you believe what he had to say, that's basically was his argument, was that they just knew this was the best for their job. This was the best performance they could give. It would help the leagues. It may hurt a team here or there, but it would help the leagues. It would bring more TV attention. It would bring more revenue. And let's face it.
He wasn't doing it to help the league. He was doing it to save his own skin.
In Tim's case, it was he got involved with some dangerous guys, and he did it to get out of that trouble, and it had nothing to do with the league. So you don't believe that?
It's a story.
You don't believe that? You believe the league had something to do with it?
Well, that's what he claims in his book. In the book he wrote, he says, of course, he didn't fix the game at all. Now, a lot of gamblers would say Donahue clearly fixed games. I mean, this is a different story. I wrote another book called Larceny Games, which just came out, which is about how I think organized crime and gamblers have gotten to players, and it's based on FBI files.
I believe that
Hall of Fame guys have been gotten to and have bet on their own games and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that's more likely than.
Okay, but now think of this. The NFL says that's never happened in its history.
Well, I mean,
baseball says that hasn't happened since 1919, and yet I found numerous FBI files that say that's a complete load. That's lies.
I agree that's a lie.
I think the reason that it can happen is that the NFL does not know about it, right?
Whoa.
I mean, this is the shady underbelly.
No,
of,
I think the NFL would know.
America,
I agree. I agree it's a lie, but
remember that the NFL has what they call a security division, and I interviewed the former head of NFL security. And the security division is comprised of former CIA agents, FBI agents, Secret Service agents, DEA agents, local law enforcement guys. I mean, these are guys who know their business. However, they don't really have police powers. However, they do have connections back to their, original agencies. And, for example, in many of the FBI files I saw, which date back a ways, admitted to the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the FBI would write how the NFL would say, hey, FBI, even though you're investigating a federal crime, why don't you just back off and let us do this job? The NFL, we can handle it.
So you're saying that's the security division that's doing that? Do you know what that security division is for?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, tell me what it's for.
Well, it's interesting. When I first interviewed Warren Welsh, who, like I said, was the former head of NFL security, I talked to him for an hour, and at the end of the hour, I didn't know still what NFL security did. That's how he talked.
So you still don't know?
Talked in roundabout ways.
Well, he's a politician, basically.
The NFL, maintains liaison with local law enforcement. They maintain liaison with the FBI. I said, hey, look, if you know a player is committing a crime, what would you do? He said to me, and I quote him in the book, he said to me, well, I'd first go to the NFL and talk to them. He wouldn't turn them over to the law enforcement agency of.
So he would try to self-police it, contain it. That's what he tried to do. Right. Okay.
Right.
That makes sense to me.
They're there basically to say, hey, listen, if you get pulled over and you've been drinking, you have this card in your wallet. It's it says that I was in the whatever, the FBI. If they can give you some leniency, that would be great. Don't take a breathalyzer test. It's not. You don't have to do that. Make them, give you a blood test when they take you in. It's little subtle things like that. They try to keep the guys on the team out of trouble. And if you are out in public and you're being accosted by someone, a fan of another team, that sort of thing, you have the number of the security guy on your team to call and say, listen, I'm having some problems. I'm going to erupt here unless something's done about it. Can, you come pick me up? Or can you arrange to have this, somehow, can you remove me from this situation?
What you're saying
somehow?
Makes total sense.
To help the players.
I get it. What you're saying makes sense, and I totally believe that. But how does that transform into games being fixed?
Well, like I say, if you want to look at the security division and what you say they do, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, that's true. But at the same time, I cannot cite a single case, and if you have one, please tell me, of where a law enforcement agency, whatever it is, has caught a player, whatever league it is, involved in some sort of crime, say, you know what, I want to thank NFL security, or I want to thank NBA security for the job they did in bringing forward this criminality so we could lead to these arrests. It never happened.
Right.
It's never happened. I mean, Tim Donahue would still be in the NBA today if it wasn't for the FBI's investigation.
Now,
that's a true fact.
you talk about.
I don't understand that statement at all. What are you asking for?
I'm
an example of
NFL security is the police force in a sense for the NFL.
No, it's not. It's there to help the players remove themselves from potentially dangerous or illegal situations. It's there to help the players.
Did NFL security not investigate the Bountygate scandal, supposedly?
Probably,
Did they not
yeah, sure.
investigate the incognito story right now? They actually act as a police force for the league.
And
no.
what are the what are the penalties? What are the penalties
as well?
What are the penalties though? Like what are the consequences as a police force? Like what do they do to these people?
Well, that's exactly it. That's the big question. Is they operate in many ways outside of oversight. I mean,
Right.
leagues, I think that's one of the reasons, for example, that the leagues do not want sports gambling legalized is because they don't want the outside oversight that comes with it. Because if they have the sports books watching the betting, watching the lines, and watching the money that's coming in, like it happens in Europe.
Sure.
And in Europe, we've seen numerous soccer matches, tennis matches, cricket matches, very recently been fixed. We've seen guys get arrested. We've seen guys get convicted of fixing these matches. And here in the United States, sports gambling outside of Nevada, for the most part, is completely illegal. It's a multi-billion-dollar business, and no one's watching the money. No one's watching going on. So if you bring a legalization across the United States and you have a level of oversight, the NFL, the NBA, and all those leagues are going to start worrying because you know what? They're going to see strange things happening because these big-time gamblers are betting thousands of millions of dollars on these games, and you're going to see it lead to investigations, and you're going to see it lead to the things that the leagues don't want, and that's the question of the integrity of these sports.
I believe that illegal gambling is a big reason the NFL is so popular, and I believe that they would look the other way in a lot of situations. I believe there's a security force, blah blah blah. I believe games have been fixed, but I don't know how prevalent it is now.
When was the last
time you
that
think
was
a
fixed?
player was involved in a fix? When's the last time you think that happened?
Well, the hard part, of course, is obviously, and you'll probably jump all over my back for this, is proving this beyond a reasonable doubt.
No, I get it. I mean,
the fact of the matter is the FBI, and like I say, in these files I obtained for larceny games, which were untouched. Nobody ever, dug them up before I did. And I don't work for ESPN. I don't work for Sports Illustrated. I don't work for these media outlets that supposedly cover these leagues. They show, like I say, that they investigated numerous guys, Hall of Fame athletes, superstars like Muhammad Ali for fixing fights. And the problem they had is when they had a source, be it a gambler, be it a bookie, be it a mobster, and informing them, look, this player is working with this gambler, and this game's going to be fixed, and that result matched exactly the information the FBI got ahead of time, it didn't necessarily mean they could go out and arrest somebody and convict them. They had to get solid, concrete evidence and these sort of things. There isn't any. It's not a written contract. It's a handshake deal. If they didn't get somebody on a wiretap, which was really hard to do, and if they didn't get someone to confess, which was going to confess to a federal crime without, evidence against them, well, the FBI was out of luck. And that's why, in the real sense, they stopped investigating for this in the 1980s.
So you think it happens with players still, but it's hard to prove.
It's extremely hard to prove.
Well, in your book,
I mean, like you say, you can look at game film and you could say so-and-so had a bad game, but can you prove he intentionally had a bad game?
Do you think something like the Super Bowl that was just played could be fixed? Do you think it could happen on that level?
Be fixed. I think if you look at the World Cup, which is the biggest sporting event in the world, it's the most watched sporting event in the world, we know for a fact that World Cup matches, soccer matches, have been fixed by gamblers and organized crime. We know without a doubt it's happened. If they can fix that, you could definitely fix a football game, be it the Super Bowl, regular season, preseason, what have you. It can be done.
Wait,
you're talking about
is this-
soccer.
when
I'm
you
talking
say-
about sports.
When you say we know without a doubt, who is we?
Oh, you can look it up online.
The general
there's a guy
public.
by the name of Declan Hill wrote a book called The Fix, where he watched matches being fixed, watched World Cup soccer matches being fixed.
And when was this? How long ago?
Matches have been fixed.
How long ago was this?
Off the top of my head, it was the 2006 World Cup, I think.
Jeez.
Look,
Well,
there's
in your
no-
book, in your book, you have a list of all the known fixed games and incidents of gambling in the history of professional sports, right?
Well, I tried to.
When is your most recent NFL fix?
You mean by gamblers?
Yeah, that should go. Okay, by gamblers. Good.
Yeah.
By gamblers, I want to say the last time the FBI investigated such a thing that I could find probably was, I'm trying to think the exact date, probably early 1980s.
Oh,
Okay,
wow.
early 80s. So you're talking
I know
30
that's-
years ago.
Again, that's a while ago, but at the same time, remember, like I said, the FBI quit. They stopped doing this. Because
Okay.
the Reagan era, they were tasked to fight the war on drugs. And at that point, they basically dropped these sports gambling investigations. They eliminated actually the file designation for them entirely. So now what happens is when you hear things about like the University of Toledo, University of San Diego, Northwestern, Boston College, all these more recent college fixes, those all resulted from other investigations. Even Tim Donaghy wasn't an investigation into the NBA or an NBA referee. It was a wiretap into organized crime in New York City that actually turned up where they heard they had a referee under the control, and that's what led to that arrest.
Do you know
it's
how?
not something they actively search out anymore because, again, they leave it to the leagues to police themselves.
Do you know how hard the league stresses to players that gambling will not be
I can
tolerated?
imagine.
I mean,
can
it
imagine.
is
Do players gamble still?
every year. No. I mean, players don't gamble on sports. They don't do sports betting.
I don't know if
Art
that's
Schlichter. Art Schlichter's a guy who played quarterback for the Colts in the 80s or 90s. Yeah, every season, twice a year, we would watch the Art Schlichter story and how he got mixed up with guy from Goodfellas.
Well, Henry Hill.
Henry Hill.
Oh,
Well, listen, John. You live your life properly. You're a straight and narrow guy. I mean, maybe you don't know what's going. I
probably don't.
I think people players gamble on sports. I think they do.
Scenario.
There are some players out there gamble. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, here's the thing. Why would you risk your career?
Because you're an addict. Because you're addicted to gambling. I think that's a real
but if you never get into, well, listen, if you're playing sports all the way up through, it is stressed to you that that's just not going to be tolerated. You're off the team.
It doesn't matter.
Why would you?
People.
I just think the
you're talking about the psyche of a gambler.
I think the incidence is much smaller than you think.
Okay.
Because
but I think it happens.
I can't say that it doesn't.
Right.
That would be ridiculous for me to say no, it doesn't.
Yeah.
happen,
What were you going to say? The scenario you're talking.
I was just going to say, I'll give you just a scenario, for example, because a lot of people say, well, you can't get to players today; they make too much money, et cetera, et cetera. I think if a gambler organized crime is going to fix a game, it's like a crime of opportunity. They have to have a toehold. They have to have a player who has a gambling problem. They have to have a referee who has a drug problem. They have to have some sort of toehold to get in. And
a way to get your hooks into them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, for example, there's the rumor going around, like, for example, that Aaron Rodgers is homosexual.
Right.
Be it true or not, who cares? But for play devil's advocate, say he is.
Okay.
Now, say a guy knows a guy who knows Aaron Rodgers is homosexual. He knows he's having trysts with somebody. They set up a hotel room. They get some incriminating pictures. They go up to Aaron Rodgers and say, hey, look, do you want these to be on TMZ tomorrow, or do you want to maybe shave some points in the game?
Well, it's blackmail. Listen, you're talking about a crime that's as old as Shakespeare. Of course. I can believe that could happen.
It's very easy to have. In fact, one of the things I have actually, the FBI video that was co-produced by the NBA that they used to show to players before the season started in the FBI sports bribery presentations that they gave.
And it says, don't be gay.
Well, one of the things they talk about was a true case where a known guy would get to athletes, and they don't really say who, but I have the file, and I have the video, and they would get two women to set up an athlete, get them to go back to their room, and in the middle of the tryst, which they were filming, of course, they would substitute the woman with a man. And then they would show the athlete later the video and say, hey, look what happened here. Did you know? Yeah, maybe you're a little drunk. Maybe you had a little too much coke, whatever. You went along with the party. Here's the video. Same thing. Do you want this to be on the nightly news tomorrow, or do you want to shave some points?
Well, it's like it's like
happened that no league has ever admitted to, though it's known that it happened to professional athletes and it happened to college athletes because this guy did it for a very long time.
Well, it's like in The Godfather, when the NFL's version of Robert Duvall walks in and goes, listen, we're very lucky this place is run by my brother. And, this girl had no family. It's as if she didn't exist. All that exists is our friendship. It's blackmail. I know. Is that possible? Everything you're saying, I think it's completely possible. How often it happens, I don't know. But if it happens just once, it's an insanely great story,
But that's the big question, is how often does it happen? Because, like I say, I don't believe the answer is zero. It may not be as often as I believe.
I agree with you. You know what? I agree with you.
The files, but the point is that it's a very, very possible, and for the leagues to tell us otherwise, and for the sports media, I believe, not to do their job and investigate these potential stories is also a big crime in and of itself. I wrote the story. I don't know if you saw it in the New York Post. Story came out back in September about members of the New York Knicks shaving points for the cocaine dealer. Okay, that came out of my book, straight out of my book, Larceny Games. It went viral after it was posted on the Post on a Saturday night online for their Sunday morning edition. It was within like an hour. It was on Sports Illustrated. It went viral, much to my own surprise. You know where it did not wind up? It did not wind up on the NBA's #1 financial contributors website, which is ESPN.
Mm-hmm.
ESPN.
Well, because they have to validate everything that they put on ESPN.
And it was.
Website,
well, he's saying the Post, New York Post.
Straight out of the FBI files, and the FBI said this is 100% true.
Right.
And in fact, that's said in the New York Post article on which every other article was based.
That's not surprising. Listen,
well, does it say in your article that the FBI said that it is true, or did the FBI say that it was true?
Well, it came right out of the FBI files, and when the guy from the New York Post validated my claims in my book. He went to the FBI, and the FBI said, yeah, you know what? Came straight out of our files.
It sounds a little convoluted and circuitous. I mean, maybe – listen, I think the bottom line is this is going to be met by athletes with a lot of denial, without a doubt, with a lot of anger, because if you're suggesting that what we sacrifice to go out there and play something that's clean and true and valid, and it can be manipulated in this way, that will infuriate everyone who puts their body on the line and devotes their life.
But who do you get mad? Who do you get mad at? A guy like this for uncovering it, or the people who actually do it?
For suggesting
Look at Pete Rose.
Listen,
suggesting it. I mean, he's probably
uncovering it. Uncovering what? I mean, uncovering
evidence that people do this.
Conspiracy theory, basically.
Well, now don't use the word conspiracy theory, because what it is I'm skeptical of the leaks. I'm skeptical of what they're telling me as a fan. What I know, they lied to me. I know they've lied to me. I mean, they tell me, the NFL is steroid-free. Bull. That's complete lies. They don't test for HGH.
Wait. They don't say it's steroid-free. They bust guys for steroids every year.
Oh, not as many. How easy is to beat that test? Lawrence Taylor used to beat the test.
No, he didn't.
Von Miller
and he got busted for the
until he got busted for using someone else's urine.
They bust guys all the time. Every year, guys are suspended.
Problem does it? They still use how many members? 3 members of the Seattle Seahawks Super Bowl winning defense. They're 3 members of their defensive backfield. All tested positive for steroids.
All right, let's take a break. Let's take a break. Can you stick around?
Positive for Adderall.
We got to take a break. Can you stick around?
Sure, I can stick around.
Let's take a break. Got a few more questions for you. Back after.
The Artie Lange Show, weeknights on Audience, only on DirecTV.